Good morning, I am WaywornWyrm, and welcome to my channel, and welcome to The Stolen Lands, my Pathfinder Kingmaker series. Be it so known that the bearer of this charter has been charged by the Sword Lords of Rostov, acting upon the greater good and authority vested within them by the office of the Regent of the Dragonscale Throne, has granted the right of exploration and travel within the wilderness region known as the Greenbelt. Exploration should be limited to an area no further than 36 miles east and west and 60 miles south of Oleg's trading post. The carrier of this charter should also strive against banditry and other unlawful behavior to be encountered. The punishment for unrepentant banditry remains, as always, execution by sword or rope. So witnessed on this 24th day of Talistril under the watchful eye of the Lordship of Rostov and authority granted by Lord Noleski Sertova, current regent of the Dragonscale Throne. Lucian Volsto read the charter once again before putting it back into his pack as his small group continued their march along the South Rostland Road on the way to Oleg's trading post. Lucian was a young human who was seen by many as the perfection of physical prowess. His entire life has been spent learning the art of the sword with the goal of becoming one of the Sword Lords of Rostov. Leading this expedition into the Stolen Lands is his chance of gaining enough renown to join the Sword Lords, if not enough to start a legend enough to rival that of Baron Aldori himself. At 6 feet and 6 inches tall, Lucian cut an impressive image in his scale mail armor, a heavy wooden shield painted red, and a longsword on his hip. His brown hair was cut close to his head, with brown eyes and brown skin. One of his companions was Petra Marcello, who was in many ways Lucian's opposite. While he was tall and muscular, she was short and only 5 feet tall and thin of frame. While his features were brown, her hair was vibrant red, eyes green as emeralds, and her skin was a light tan compared to his brown. Petra was a former brigand who was seeking a new life in this expedition. She had a short sword on each hip and a short bow on her back. She had exquisitely crafted studded leather armor for protection. However, she was struggling a bit with her gear, which weighed half as much as she did. Tiber Ascius walked with the quiet confidence rarely seen outside of people of the faith as he was. He quickened his pace slightly to walk up to Petra and gripped her shoulder reassuringly for a second. I know it's heavy. My pack is giving me just as much trouble. But, given how much weight is dedicated to our food, I imagine soon enough we will be wishing this weight was back on our shoulders. He smiled at her and slowed back down to retake his former place between her and the last member of the party. Tiber was almost as tall as Lucian at 6 feet and 3 inches tall. The cleric of Sarenrae had brown hair, green eyes, and a darkly tanned skin. He had scale mail armor and a heavy wooden shield like Lucian, but instead of a longsword on his hip, he had a scimitar, the weapon of his goddess. His silver angelic ankh lightly hitting his armor with every step. He grew up knowing he was the bastard of one of the noble houses of Brevoy, and entered the clergy early to avoid pining for that which he could never have, although a successful expedition to explore this wilderness might just cause his family to recognize him in order to take some of the prestige from a job well done. Umbria Bobolus was the last member of the small party. She relied on her staff to help her. She was dealing with the weight worst of all. She was a bookish wizard, not used to the physical work of adventuring. She had pined for this life, after seeing all the images of the wizards with their staves and spellbooks conquering the wilderness, and hearing the stories that went with the images. No one ever talked about the backpacks filled with food and tent and bedroll and life savings that was strapped to her back. She was on the tall side for a woman, at just under 6 feet tall, with dark red hair, blue eyes, and skin lighter than anyone else in the group. It was about mid-afternoon when they finally spotted a fortification they knew was Oleg's trading post. The post was an old fort, and was at a place where the South Rustland Road went from mostly south to a southeast direction. The wooden gate was open when they arrived, and as the group walked into the post, two things were immediately clear. Firstly was the sound of hammering, which was coming from a nearby building and was apparently caused by a middle-aged man working to fix the roof of the building. The second was the woman of a similar age to the man who was rushing toward them. "Welcome, welcome," the woman greeted. "I'm Svetlana, and this is my husband Oleg. We're the owners of this trading post. I'm so glad you've come to help us. Come, come, I have stew and bread and wine. Take off those packs and warm yourself by our fire." She came in like a whirlwind and hustled the whole group through the small courtyard and into the door of her house. In fact, they were all sitting down with food and drink in front of them before it dawned on Lucian what she had said. "Excuse me? What do you mean by help you?" he asked as his companions started their meal. At that moment, Oleg entered the house sweaty. "Typical," he said in a gruff tone. "Adventurers come to our house and take advantage of our hospitality without knowing what ails us." Svetlana frowned at her husband before looking at the group. "Surely the Sword Lords told you when they sent you here." Lucian shook his head. "I'm afraid not. I carry with me a charter to explore this area for the Sword Lords and help evaluate the area for a colony and prepare it for one if needed. But that's all." Oleg's face soured even more at Lucian's word before his wife replied. "Oleg and I moved here close to a year ago and have created this trading post from a small fort that had been long abandoned. Then, 3 months ago, bandits started coming and demanding a tax every month, which has almost completely prevented us from being able to turn any sort of profit. We sent word with hunters traveling back into Rostland to have guards come protect us, but until a week ago, we had no reply. Then, a week ago, we received word that the guards would be coming soon, but it'd be a few days before they would be sent. However," the letter continued, "a group of adventurers would be heading here to explore the Greenbelt, but would help us out. Which is very needed, because the bandits will be back tomorrow morning to take their monthly due." Lucian nodded sympathetically at the woman's story. "Part of our charter does include fighting banditry in the area. I would say defending your trading post is a good start." Tiber paused in his eating long enough to join the conversation. "Yes, we will help you. While we're not initially expecting this problem, we are more than happy to help as you explain what the issue is." Lucian looked to both Oleg and Svetlana. "What can you tell us about these bandits?" Oleg sat at the table with the group for the first time. Their first visit was 3 months ago. They threatened to burn down this trading post and take Svetlana for their own amusement back at their camp if we didn't hand over all of the furs and trade goods we had accumulated over the past month from the hunters and trappers that make up the majority of our customers. Anger flashed in Petra's eyes at this. "They didn't threaten that." Svetlana took over for her husband for a minute. "They've come twice since, each time within an hour of sunup. We have learned to have their taxes ready and hand them over quickly. They seem very eager to return to their camp somewhere here in the Greenbelt. With their attitude, I think their camp is within a day's ride of here. Oleg picked the story back up. The first time they visited, there were a dozen of them, 10 lower-ranking armed men, led by a cloaked man armed with a bow, and a woman who carried 2 small hatchets. The woman did the majority of the talking on that first trip, and her black sense of humor and the way she smiled when she spoke of what fate would await Svetlana if we didn't comply frightened my wife all the more. With a shiver, Svetlana took back over the thread of conversation. The woman seemed particularly sharp and observant, whereas the cloaked man seemed to be a bit more crude and foolish. This, plus the fact that she quite nearly lopped off Oleg's right hand with one of her hatchets in a cruel bit of mockery, has us both believing that she's the most dangerous of these bandits. Oleg took back the telling to finish the story. On the second and third visit, only the crude, hooded man accompanied the bandits. On the second visit, he came with only 6 other men, whereas the last time, he only came with 4. We suspect that they've let down their guard and think we are completely cowed. Hopefully, when they visit tomorrow, they'll be even fewer in number, and hopefully the woman with the hatchets won't be with them. Lucian nodded as the story finished. I think we can work with this. I'll have to look over what we have available, but I think it's doable. The sun rose early and bright the next morning. Lucian had his plan, and he hoped it would work. They had worked late into the night to break up the ground in front of the gate so the bandits would have to dismount their horses. As they walked in, he would step out from around the bunkhouse they had slept in and engage them. Petra would be hiding in a hay pile in a wagon near the gate to pop out and surprise them. Umbria would be laying flat on the catwalk that ringed the inside wall of the post on one side of the gate, and Tiber would be on the other. When the fight started, Tiber would jump down to physically put himself between the gate and the bandits, and Umbria would stand up and start firing off her spells. Thank you for listening to the first episode of The Stolen Lands. Tune in probably later this week for the next update to this, and tune in either Sunday or Monday for hopefully a surprise.